Good afternoon. Welcome back to another rendition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. You are tuned in to another edition of Leica Stories. Today we are in conversation with Joseph Seif. Joe, what's going on, man?
Hey, Derek, thank you so much for having me.
It's great to have you on. Look, from our conversation the other day, I've been waiting for this conversation. We kind of started to dive in, and then it's like anytime you talk to somebody for the first time, you want to get
Mhm.
every topic covered. You don't want to take a break. You just want to keep going and going and going. So it's great to have you on, man.
Thank you, Derek. Appreciate it.
So it's time to get down to conversation. Joe, like I said, super stoked to have you on because you're such an interesting person. You're so well rounded. I'm going to say this because my father is a classically trained pianist. I didn't tell you the other day. I had to drop it live.
Mhm.
My son is actually taking piano, and I've always found a link between musicians and interesting, creative, intelligent people. So take us a little bit into your background. And, we're talking about Joe Seif, the entire person, not just Joe Seif, the photographer, director. Take us back in time. When did you start getting into the arts in general? And how did we get to where we are today?
Of course. So yes, as you mentioned, my background started in classical piano. I started when I was 4 years old, and it was like, to me, the most important thing that ever happened in my lifetime. It was kind of like the thing that basically established my thought process, how I work with material, how I like express myself. So um, having kind of gone through the motion of starting conservatory and having private instruction and stuff like that, and working my way up through piano, I built like a skill set of not just technical but interpretive approaches. And I feel like that has really branched into the photography and cinematography aspect of things, especially later on in my life. But getting back to that, like, as you know, with musicians, it's extremely intensive. It's a very sort of competitive and difficult world to kind of maintain and stay in. And I'm a person who naturally has a lot of interests. I'm really into a lot of different things. I read a lot about different subject matter, and I'm interested in things like history and archaeology, and um, as well as obviously photography and film and the arts in general. The humanities, I tend to really gravitate towards those. So
Interesting.
having a background in piano sort of like was really great to kind of set up a career in photography and film for me, especially since like once I got to like my late teens, I was pretty burnt out with it. It's very rigorous in terms of practice, and being able to maintain that is fairly difficult, when you have other interests going on. Um, so I decided to kind of take a break from it for a while, and I discovered photography. Actually, while I was on an archaeological dig, which was really interesting. I was studying archaeology for a brief amount of time. Um, and photography has always been a part of my family. Like everyone in my family is just like constantly taking pictures of each other. It's really kind of annoying. But but I'm the same way with my daughter. I have a 5 year old, and she's got a camera in her face all the time. Um, but anyways, I sort of rediscovered that when I was shooting film, and was learning how to use a dark room and all of that stuff, and I just became obsessed with it. And that's how I made the jump from piano to photography, generally speaking.
Mhm. And when we talked about it the other day, we talked about how these different mediums, it's almost in cyclical fashion. Like it's good having different interests and different creative outlets where it's like, okay, I'm kind of burnt out in one and I can kind of lean on another one, and it might get me back on the wheel that brings me back around, where it's kind of just keeping your creativity flowing. Is that something you find with the piano and the music in general, having a different outlet where you're still getting your creativity out there, but you don't have to focus so much on the visual end of things?
Absolutely. I mean, now more than ever, the piano is such an important part of my life. And, I feel like I neglected it for a long time while I was building my photography and film career. And a few years ago, right before the pandemic hit, I went straight in, like full back into piano, and started composing sonatas and recorded an EP and then a record. And to me, it's a major part of my life. And I look at it this way, cinematography and film are such collaborative mediums. they require a lot of people to work together, and that's really what I enjoy about it. I enjoy the collaboration and, working with people that are really good at what they do and building something great, hopefully. Um, and photography is a little less so. It's still collaborative, but it does require you as a photographer to sort of run the circus or run the show. But piano is solitary. And the reason I say this is because sometimes when I'm working on a film set, I want that space to myself. I want that time alone to really express myself. If I'm going through some emotional changes or something I want to like explore and put down on paper, like it's really difficult to do that as a cinematographer because it's a team sport,
Mm.
So when going through something like that, I either walk off, take long walks on this, I go out, do some street photography, and um, or I sit down with the piano and kind of like lay it all out and discover things about myself I didn't even know. It's really kind of an amazing process.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
So are you more, because I think that dynamic is so interesting. And again, we talked about this the other day, that whole, film is very collaborative. Stills is less collaborative. It's kind of, you were saying it was kind of somewhere in the middle. And then piano is like the ultimate lone wolf kind of thing. Do
Mhm.
you, it's going back to like school when they're like, okay, I was the person that loved working in groups, or I was the person that liked being the leader. And then you had the people who were just like, no, I want to do a project on my own. Which side do you, I mean, obviously if cinema hypothetically were something that you could execute on your own, do you find yourself more of the lone wolf or liking working on the collaborative efforts?
I actually love collaborating with people. That's the best part of cinema, but the thing is, like, I want all of those aspects, right? Like I want to be able to collaborate, but sometimes I want to like run my own show. And sometimes I just don't want to be around people and I want to make music, And it just goes in cycles. It just, it's part of being a human being. You experience all these emotional ups and downs in life, and you just basically, as an artist, you want to like work with yourself and your true self, and express it in a way that is genuine and on point with what you're going through. So it's kind of a tough question to answer because it's really, I would say, all of the above.
I vibe with that. There's days,
Yeah,
you don't want anybody's opinion. You don't want the
right.
ideas. You don't even just want to. Sometimes it's just music, and sometimes not even that. Sometimes it's like you walk the streets or you go to a quiet place. Not even music can help. You just kind of want to be alone with your thoughts, bouncing around in your head. And I think that it's like you said, it's time and place. Sometimes you have those moments where you need to be around others and you need to feed off their creativity, or you like the challenge of working with
Of
stuff. And
course.
sometimes it's, you just want to be alone, sitting there, listen to some tunes, some beats, or sitting there in silence. So I think as artists, we all kind of connect with that on some level. Now, a lot
Mhm.
of us haven't been able to work on huge productions or on films. Is it that hard to get time alone? Like if you're on a movie set or on a commercial set, is it that hard to get your
Yeah.
time alone, or to really focus on, if you have great ideas that you feel would contribute to the project? What is it really like working when you might have a
It
team of,
might be a bit TMI, but sometimes I can't even go to the bathroom.
oh my God, no, it's that bad?
Yeah, it's crazy, man.
And we're gonna
Especially as a director of photography, like everyone's pulling you in every direction. But it's fine. I love it. I enjoy it. You just sort of like learn to deal with it, and you know. Um,
have
yeah,
you,
but
have you always been that type? Because some people I think are just that type, and some people they do other things and they get like myself. I get bored with still photography, so it's like, all right, I have to look for more of a challenge. Are you one of the challenge seekers, or have you always just been one to be
I,
in that environment?
I'm definitely a challenge seeker. I like to put myself out of my element all the time. I'm a primarily a portrait photographer, but this past December, I went down to Antarctica and did a ton of landscape work. So, I mean, it's just like not completely out of my element, right? Like, and those are the things that I love to experience. I love sort of um, coming at it with like as a blank slate, you know, and then gaining context from the experience and growing as a person and as an artist as well. And yeah, I mean, I've always been sort of challenge driven. I consider myself fairly technical, but I don't rely on my technical chops. I'm more interested in the artistic side of things as in every medium that I choose.
Mhm.
Um, and for that reason, I like to switch mediums whenever I feel like a creative block is happening. Not just switch mediums, but also challenge myself within those mediums, play a different genre, or in photography, do a completely different sort of genre of photography,
Like
or
going to Antarctica.
exactly, or like, or work on a photo book, right? Like things like that. I feel like I just want to experience the entire gamut of what you can do in this space. And to me, there's no way I can never be bored. There's just so much to do. And if I am even remotely bored, I just switch mediums just briefly. And what that does is it opens up this entirely different side of my brain. And when I come back to that medium, like say, after I recorded a whole piano record and put it out and all that, I went back to cinematography with a completely different perspective on cinematography. Um, People don't realize this, but the mediums themselves are closely related. Like take, classical piano and photography or cinematography, right? You're dealing with tone, you're dealing with mood, you're dealing with space, and rhythm. And all of those things, if you're experiencing them in a nondescript sort of hard to describe way, you become really tuned to that side of yourself, and you're able to channel it when you're on set. And I find that that's sort of my secret weapon, having a background in music. It makes me much more tuned to what I'm doing on set. It helps me connect with people. It helps me sort of pick, get in their headspace and, get a really strong sense of their emotional makeup and try to like channel it into the image. And to me, that whole process is extremely sacred. And I absolutely adore doing it. And that's why I'm still doing this 18 years later. So
So
yeah.
we all need to go out there and find a bunch of different things that we're interested in. I think as we get to know ourselves, like how many people just stick to what they know? And it's just that simple. You don't explore enough. You don't try to go out there and
A
find
lot.
something, right? And it's then you just get locked into a life of being a drone. You wake up, you go to work, you come
Right.
home, and I think that kind of traps you in. Now, the music thing, there's a lot of people who love music, myself being one of
Mhm.
them. Can't play any instruments, can't compose anything, strictly in the headphones. That's it. But it does open up something. And we kind of talked about this the other day of the effect of music. And I would imagine with you being able to compose music and you having studied and been classically trained, that your connection to music is 1,000 times whatever I feel like, when I'm on my way to a shoot and a song comes on or a certain type, a playlist comes on. It's like, it gets me amped up and it gets me ready. Or sometimes you have that depressed moment and you're editing photos and you have this music that kind of feeds into your depressed mood, but it pulls out the best part of your creative vision. And you start to see things that you might not have seen if you were listening to another kind of music. Can we talk a little bit about that, about how music plays into your creative vision, whether it's on set or going and back and looking through your images or through your film clips?
Absolutely. I mean, music is such an important part of my process to getting to set. Like, I make sure I'm listening like to something I really want to listen to in the car on the way over to set, for example. And while everyone is getting ready, sometimes I'll slip an earbud in and just sort of like kind of rewire and adjust to the location that I'm at. And it's funny, I have a soundtrack for everything. And it's such an important thing. It's not just classical. Classical is only a small part of the gamut of music that I'm really interested in. In the 2000s, I was in a shoegaze band. I was playing guitar in sort of an indie rock post-punk band in San Francisco, and we made a record and toured and did all that stuff. And it was an incredible experience. And I'm really into like wall of sound. Ambient type of music that helps me pair the visuals with what I'm hearing, and that makes me feel like emotionally centered and grounded before I start a shoot. So a lot of athletes do this too, before a big game, they're like, pumping themselves up with their headphones and stuff, and they're just like getting ready. I do the same thing before I go on set because it's such an important part of my life. And it helps me connect to who I really am so that I'm giving my best when I'm on set. Did that answer your question?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like everything you say, we're getting something out of it. It's like you just open your mouth and you talk, and we're getting wisdom, experience, and it's opening us up because we so many times we just talk about just photography, and then
Yeah.
we talk about where did you place a light, how did you pose this person, and I think there's so much more that feeds into it that you've tapped into, and it really is just it's a self exploration. Photography is an art that we have to connect to ourselves.
Right. There's a concept I'm really interested in. We talked about this briefly last time too. It's this concept of duende. It comes from flamenco music. And duende was also written quite a bit about by Federico Garcia Lorca and even Nick Cave. And what that is it's this authenticity, this sort of dark underbelly to things, the shadow side. And to me, my interpretation of it is for good art to exist and for us to experience it, it has to have a sense of humanity and pathos, but it also has to transcend that.
Mm.
So it's not just about it being dark and moody, but it's also about using that and then elevating itself from it. And that whole process is medium agnostic. So what that means is like, it doesn't matter if you're making work that has duende intrinsically with a piano or with a camera. To me, like for it to be really good work, it has to resonate with us at a really deep human level, through, things that may cause us pain to consider or think about sometimes, but there also has to be an element of joy and or levity that elevates it from its base sort of position.
Interesting. So is this
Yeah,
what we feel like when we look at an image and we kind of react to it before we respond?
exactly. It's the unexpressible. That's what I'm interested in. The things you can't talk about, the things you feel deeply when you experience a piece of art. And to me, that's where the mediums don't matter anymore. If you could tap into that,
Mm.
that's where your work is good. And I'm not saying my work is always like this. I strive for it to be that way. That's why I'm in this game. I think of it as a process of connecting to the human condition and transcending from having the work transcend from it. And in the process, inspiring and giving people hope and a sense of levity.
This is why I love talking to you, because I feel like I feel many of these things. I just don't articulate them as well as you do. And it's ideas that have been in my head. And I'm like, you wonder, do other people experience this? Do other people, am I crazy, or am I just seeing something that's not there? Like for music, for example, sometimes you get a song stuck in your head. You hear a song for the first time, you love it, you put it on repeat, you just play it. And I've looped songs over and over while I edit, just because I feel like whatever I'm feeling when I listen to that song is making me see things differently in my work, that images that I might have just passed over, like, oh, I don't know what I was looking at there.
Mhm.
I see them differently. I slow down, I stop. And it has nothing to do with the photography. It has to do with the effect of the music ultimately, but then it's affecting how I see the photography, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I can't edit without music. Like when I'm editing my photography, like in Capture One or Lightroom, I'm definitely tuned into something while I'm doing that. And I realize it affects how I edit as well, like the outcomes. So sometimes I'll pair a project with the style of music that I want it to sort of be infused with. And it's all sort of intangible, and it may, be kind of like be almost like a joke, but but it helps. It helps me connect with the work better.
Totally. It's funny. It's like
Yeah.
certain times I look at like my color grading, for example. It's like I can tell what kind of mood I was in. I'm like, all right, yeah, everything's very like my shadows are crushed there, and everything has like this like brownish yellow tint to it. And then sometimes it's like, okay, clearly I was on like my Southern California blues. And, I feel a certain like somebody once told me that the sky is a different color in California. And I never believed it until I went there. And
It's different in SoCal and in LA than it is in San Francisco. They're completely different. And having, being from San Francisco, like the light up there is extremely, it's like it has a completely different character. And it's the thing I miss the most about it. So yes, you're right. But also within California, the light is completely different from the south to the north. It's just kind of mind blowing.
I
Yeah.
didn't know you guys had light in San Francisco because when I was there, it was just it was clouds. I had like 2 travel days planned out, and I was like, man, I got like 40-mile-an-hour winds and
Yeah.
rain and fog the whole time. With
That's true. We have that a lot, but like, it's every once in a while you'll get like these God rays going under the clouds and under the fog and just bouncing on the buildings and creating this metallic sort of jewelry-like atmosphere. And I love shooting in that aspect in that environment. And yeah, and I miss that a lot here in LA. In LA, I live in LA now, and it's the light is fairly consistent and generally on the warmer side,
Mhm.
and therefore slightly predictable. So it depends. You have some days though, and especially in the winter where it changes and you get a lot of complexity, and that's good. But yeah.
That's the only time I've been out there is in the winter, and it's like it's not what you think. It's kind of what you think, but it's not really what you think. You get out there, and it's like you have this envision of like every day's 90 and high, and you get a 60-degree day out there, and you're like, wait, what the heck? I thought I was getting sunny 90 degrees every day.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Now, you had said when we talked the other day that you actually like composing more than playing, and I find that interesting
Yeah.
because really these little nuances, these are what tell us who we are. That's what tell other people who we are. And I think even something like that, the fact that you like to compose more than play says something about who you are as a person, as an artist. What is it about composing?
Well, composing allows me to express myself instead of interpreting someone else's work.
Mm,
And, having a background in interpreting other people's work and being able to do that for my own self, like the way I do with photography, basically allows me to create a body of work that I feel really proud of over time.
mm,
And it's also what makes it interesting. I'm creating something from nothing or from the ether or whatever you want to describe it. It's just like showing up on a set and creating strong imagery. It's the same exact process, just different medium. And for me, like I'm technically nowhere near where I would want to be, right, at this if I had stuck with piano. So I compose at the limit of my technical ability, and I do that on purpose to try to push it as far as I can, so that hopefully someday someone will pick up the work and run with it and interpret it and play it even better than I can, which that would be the dream, right? So if there are any pianists out there, I have scores for this stuff, hit me up.
Now, which is
Yeah.
easier to create on a blank canvas for you, with music or with film?
It's hard to say. I mean, all of the above. Like I said, I love the collaboration with film, and I love the collaboration with photography, and I love doing things on my own with music. So it's,
That's
yeah.
been a struggle for me, and I think that's partly why I became a street photographer, not fully. I'm
And
interested
you
in.
do beautiful work, by the way.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
You know what it is? A lot of it is I can't create with a blank canvas, and I feel like you have two types of people. There's people that conceptualize very well, and you can give them a room with 4 white walls, and they're going to come out of it with something. They're going to take props. They're going to take stuff from here and there, or they're just going to make a really cool minimalist composition. And then there's people like me where it's like I can see something cool that's already there for me. I can
Sure.
recognize something, which I always feel like, it's more impressive to be able to create. That's why I've always loved painters, musicians, because you're creating something from nothing, like you said, from the ether. And I'm really just going out there, and it's like, okay, people are like, you have great photos. Well, I just saw what was there. It was just about recognizing. How
Right.
do you keep a constant stream of ideas? How do you get to that place where you can create from nothing, blank canvas, and kind of take a mood or something that you're trying to express? What's the process like in your head?
Um, it's really difficult to describe. It's a combination of combining childhood influences and memories with um, reacting to your environment, taking long walks. And I get my best ideas late at night, especially for everything, music and photography and film. So I honor that by being a complete night owl and not getting enough sleep. But that's when those things sort of come to me. I feel like I'm sort of an antenna, and I don't necessarily if I work too hard to try to make these things materialize, it doesn't quite work. They seem to sort of show up in my life and in my thought process, and that's when I do my best work. So it's kind of hard to answer that question, but yeah, I think the best description of it is like try to be an antenna to everything.
I love that.
And process it internally and give your own the most of yourself to the work. And it seems to work out.
That's interesting. It's almost
Yeah.
like, the way I frame it, it's like, oh, you guys are creating out of thin air. And to hear you talk about it, it's like, no, you're not really creating out of thin air. You just have to pay attention. Like you said, be an antenna. You have to pick up on, I guess that could be a vibe. That could be, okay, we have really great light here. I want to work with this light,
Right.
create in some way, or
Well, I love portraiture for this reason. You're resonating with your subject. You're connecting with your subject at like a really deep level. Sometimes you only get 3 minutes with them. So, and sometimes you'll have hours, and I just love the act of portraiture, like the process of portraiture, because to me, it's about showing up somewhere, meeting someone I've never worked with before or seen before. Sometimes they're celebrities, so I'm familiar with their work, but I look at everyone as a blank slate when I meet with them for the first time. And it's really just about getting a read on their vibe and their energy, so to speak. It sounds a bit esoteric, but and capturing it. And I use the same process of being an antenna in portraiture, which is you're there to listen, you're there to watch and observe and understand this human being in front of you. So it is extremely important to honor them with work that reflects who they actually are, instead of projecting yourself on them and using them as a puppet, essentially, and putting them in different places, and just to get this image that you have in your head. And people are not props, right? So and that's why portraiture to me is extremely important as in my artistic journey, because it's all about connection. I'd love to actually talk about some of those images if possible.
definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, great.
I'm gonna pull up some portraits here, and if there's any that you want me to zoom in on and focus on, just let me know.
Up to you, Derek. You can,
No,
take a pick.
these are all awesome. I think
Thank
every
you.
single one of these is better than anything I could ever do. And I'm gonna bring it up because a lot of times you have people that sit there and it's like, okay, well, anybody can come in and take pictures of widely known people and celebrities and this and that. And it's like, and it's not easy. There's heightened pressure. There has to be this pressure to perform, this pressure to take this great person and make them look great, make them feel great. And kind of, these are people who have Sting. How many iconic portraits has Sting had in his career, in his lifetime? Now you have to put your mark on it. So I kind of would venture to say that it puts a little more pressure on you and the artist. And like you said, sometimes you might only have 3 minutes to create. So let's
2 days. Like with Sting, I was shooting a music video with him. So we spent 2 days in a studio, and it's like, it became super comfortable. Like there was no weirdness, Now I was primarily the director of photography on it, and I happened to snap a few photos, It wasn't a portrait session, but it's one of my favorite portraits. And I also want to talk about, like, if you scroll down, talking about the 3 minutes,
Yeah.
like, for example, Richard Branson, right? Like I had been shooting an interview with him in Vancouver, and we had set up a secondary area to do these portraits. And I literally, he had to go, he had to catch a flight. So like we had him walk right by the setup. I did 3 minutes of photography with him and thanked him profusely, and he left. And then the amazing thing about this is this ended up being a billboard for a company called Salesforce, for their one of their events. I used to do a lot of work for them. And when he came to speak at that event, he saw the billboard. He told his assistant at the time that this was the best portrait he's ever seen of himself. So, of course, I rushed and made him a print, got it framed, and then handed it to him in person. And that was a really amazing moment. You know, it's all about those little moments, right?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah,
Well,
and
can we talk about
yeah.
the choice of this? How many frames do you get off? And you said it was pretty quick. I ask because how many people? I mean, it's like everything we see. You're thinking eyes on the camera, your typical quote unquote cookie cutter portrait, headshot, whatever you want. That's what most people are thinking. I think the gesturing, the eyes down, the looking away, the way it's lit, everything is just perfect with this.
Thank you. So the interesting thing about Richard Branson is he's heavily photographed. He's someone he's like always in front of the camera. And when he goes in front of the camera, he has these like little beats that he does. So he has these poses that he has in his head that he thinks he's going to do, right? He'll do it, and then you'll snap a picture and he'll go to another one. So I noticed this right away, and I did not want to have an image just like everyone else's. So I started shooting in between the little ticks, the little beats that he did, like including things like when he'd spread his arms like he's flying, and he would like do these like really kind of funny gestures and whatever. And it's part of his charm, right? But to me, I was more interested in the reset moments when he's resetting. So I kept shooting through those. And in the edit, I basically didn't use any of the poses he generally goes into. And I worked primarily with just images from in between moments. And that's what I love about portraiture, right? It's the in between moments. So yeah.
That's something I don't think we hear enough to embrace because, like you said, it's something that everybody has their go-to, especially if they're widely photographed. They have their go-tos that's why it looks like everything else. And this is how you set yourself apart.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So
Some pictures.
so,
You know what I'm going to narrow in on here.
oh yeah. Why is Condoleezza Rice playing the piano? Right? Pretty crazy. Turns out she's a classically trained pianist. And this production company from Utah called me one time in San Francisco, and I was still living there. And they said, we're shooting a music video with Condoleezza Rice. I was like, what? And they said, yeah, she's a classical pianist. We're doing a music video with her at this little church in Tiburon. And would you like to come and be our still photographer and take some portraits of her? I was like, of course, that sounds amazing. So I show up, and lo and behold, she's shooting a music video. So when they were done with that, I worked with their lighting team and all of that stuff and created these setups that I wanted to shoot of her performing. And I also did some editorial style images of her, which is the next image that you see, which is a little bit more conventional. But my big takeaway with Condoleezza Rice is she was an absolutely interesting person to talk to, extremely well-rounded, and knowledgeable about multiple topics. Obviously, I didn't go into politics or anything with her, but like, she's certainly somebody who has a lot of, it's hard to describe, a lot of curiosity in the world, and in that I saw part of myself, and that's something I jived with her a lot on, like this ability to jump from music to the arts to history to all these things. And we had a really amazing conversation, and to me that was the special part of doing a photo shoot with someone like her. And if you notice, I've got like a really quick shot of Hillary Clinton next to her. So that's two secretaries of state right next to each other, who are as far on the spectrum as you can imagine from each other. And with Hillary Clinton, it was literally like just a minute or two of just her passing by, doing a quick shot, and then I got it in the Canon, and that was that. And she was talking to someone here. I had zero connection with her. So this shot to me feels a little bit more documentary
Mm.
than, because I didn't get the opportunity to have conversations with her the way I did with Condoleezza Rice. But I still feel like this is a fun shot of her because you never see her this loosened up and this natural in a lot of her images.
Totally.
She's always really sort of buttoned up and focused. And yeah, so
Even
I
the
feel
light
like,
perfect. It's
thank
like
you.
perfect the way it shapes the chin area down there into the neck. It's like it's just a nice, flattering lighting.
Thank you.
All right, I gotta go back in. I love looking at your work.
Thank
And
you, Derek.
I think it's just you look at the range here. It's so many different types of people, so many different types of images, yet still a cohesive feel. It's almost like you can still see your style through and through. You know, you everybody from Naomi Osaka to I'm a huge Metallica fan. First live concert ever
Yeah,
seen.
they're amazing. I got to work with them in their studio too once in north of San Francisco. I'm not going to say exactly where, but yeah.
That's awesome. So, you know, I gotta pause on these for a minute. What's it like? What's the difference in a scenario like this versus any other set studio kind of setting when you're
Oh
out there
man,
on
adrenaline. It is amazing. You really feel like you're almost like with the band, when you have access like this. And to me, another thing about photography that I love is access, right? Like I always say, the camera is my passport.
Mm,
It allows me to be in situations I would never physically be as a person just because I'm holding it.
totally.
And someone is trusting me with getting images of something. So it's all about access. And when you're doing it, you want to do a really good job whenever you can.
Now, is there
It's,
anything in here that what stands out to you? I can look through these all day and it's going to be like, oh, I love the light in this, or oh, I'm a huge Metallica fan.
yeah.
What are some of these that you look at and you're just like, I outdid myself? Are there that you really have a strong connection to? Is there any?
Oh, it's these are almost mementos of adventures. Like if you look at Petra Nemkova's image here, I was in Haiti shooting a documentary for a foundation, and she has a school, and she's an absolutely beautiful person inside out. And to me, she's a former supermodel. So the images you see of Petra Nemkova are usually her kind of like splayed out on a beach or something, or looking absolutely stunning. But in this scenario, I feel like I captured her as a human, and and that makes me really happy because there's a rarity to that. That's something that just jumps out, and the context of where it is. It reminds me of being in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, right after the earthquake, and it was an insane experience to go through that and connect with someone that way.
I'm so glad you brought that one up because that was actually the ones that I had on my list. There were certain portraits as I have been through your site, and it's like there's certain ones that just jumped out for various reasons. And Petra Nemkova was one of them because it's you never see in our culture, if somebody is a supermodel, you see them only as a supermodel. You very rarely see this side, especially when being photographed. If it's like, okay, she's a model, she's a supermodel.
Yeah.
If you're capturing this moment, you're seizing this moment, we're gonna have her seen as she is normally seen, not in a setting like this. And I just think it's so beautiful, especially the environmental. For somebody who creates so well with a blank canvas, you have such a good eye for an environmental portrait.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm gonna move along here because
Yeah.
probably I think some of your most dynamic work is your underwater. I mean, I've seen a lot of underwater and a lot of it looks the same and a lot of it looks like, okay, almost gimmicky. Some of the stuff you do see, yours is just outstanding. So I want to, we're gonna dive into BTS in a little bit. So we'll kind of get a little peek into it. But how did the whole underwater thing come about? Are you a secret scuba diver that we don't know about?
I am actually. I've always been into oceanography. So ever since I was a little kid, my favorite show was as a little kid in the 80s, right? It was the Jacques Cousteau's series, right?
Mm.
So to me, that blew my mind when I was a child. So I've always thought I'd learn how to scuba dive. Never really got into it until I decided to start doing underwater photography. I started having these really crazy dreams of me being underwater with dancers, surrounded by dancers, over and over and over again. And I was like, this is a sign I need to go out there and get certified. So, mid to late 2000s, I went and got certified in Monterey, California, middle of January, because I had this urge to shoot these. Super cold water, 7 mil wetsuit, you know, 2 weeks with SSI, incredible program. And then, lo and behold, I started connecting with dance companies. This particular one is called Capacitor. We did a series which was perfect timing with them because they had a show called Okeanos about the oceans. So we did an entire underwater series with just these dancers, and then I started getting requests to do underwater work as well, like with Stanford University. I photographed their aquatics team, synchronized swimmers, which was really interesting. And then just a couple of years ago, I got a shoot with Toyota commercial on the cinematography side, where I photographed Simone Manuel, who's an Olympic athlete, at the Stanford pool underwater. And we also filmed her for the commercial for Toyota. So, it all sort of just stems from an idea and a dream, and it progresses. And to me, what I love about underwater photography is you can abstract the human form, just like you're seeing here.
Mm.
You're not looking at things conventionally. The human form is reactive to the environment, and it's about our place in the world. And it helps me suspend a human in motion in a way that is not possible with gravity. And for that reason, I'm extremely interested with it. I'm not interested in like the flowing red robes you'll see a lot of times, and like the beauty stuff. I mean, sure, it's great. I'll do those when I need to, but what I am really interested in is abstraction and the relationship of the human to the environment. And for that reason, I feel compelled to keep doing this type of work underwater. And it takes a lot of effort and time to do a shoot like that. A lot of things have to be in place. So that's why I don't do those as often, but I intend to keep doing them.
I was going to say, it's not like you can exactly call out direction while they're underwater. And it's something that I didn't even think of it when I first started looking, because you get captivated by the images. You have one of those duende moments where it's like you're just feeling the images.
Yep.
You don't really think about like the technical aspect until I started looking through the BTS, and then it just all of a sudden hit me like, well, how the hell do you direct people underwater? What is the conversation like before you go in? I mean, we're talking about something where if the light's not right, you can't exactly just be like, hey, can I have, I need that light 2 stops up over here.
My trick is to roll a ladder over the pool so that I can quickly get up and they can quickly up and just hang on to it. And we can have a quick chat and then go back down. If you're going to be surfacing and taking all your stuff off and they're kind of treading water, it makes it a lot harder. So I like to have a ladder sort of laid across the pool for me to grab onto and for them to grab onto. And it's a really kind of simple solution, I guess. But yeah, there is some communication that happens, but you also have to trust in the dancer. I mean, if you're working with dancers, they're so tuned to their movement and their bodies that your job is to really watch them perform, express themselves. I'm not exactly telling them how to pose at all. I'm just reacting to what they're doing. I'm seeing things that are interesting to me and positioning myself in a way that I can capture it. And sometimes I go into these shoots not knowing at all what I want. Like I have no idea what I want. I just lay everything in place and here we go. Let's see what happens, right? Mm-hmm. And that's exciting.
A little more reactionary, where you're just kind of going with the flow.
Right. This is not portraiture. This is something else.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah. With portraiture, it's about connecting with the person. This is about connecting with the movement of the dancer. So it's not about direction and talking. A lot of it is nonverbal communication and working with the environment.
And trusting them to do what they're going to do. And you're trusting yourself to...
I'm trusting myself to position myself in a place and time where it's going to work perfectly, and for the strobes to fire and all those things. There's a lot of things in play, but when it does, I feel like magic happens, and that keeps me interested in this. You see, like it's a game, and it's also really, really enjoyable. And yeah,
the challenge. It's like
the challenge.
Everything manifests itself in its own little way. It's like, even like the piano and the music, going back to that, is like it's not easy. It's something that, as you've
Yeah.
said, it takes years and years to perfect. It has to become second nature. I mean, playing piano is
Yeah.
it's a heck of a lot different than learning to type with your hands on the correct keys on a keyboard. It's, reading the music alone is something where I can't even keep up with. My son is 6 years old and taking piano. And when the teacher's like, okay, have him practice these at home, I'm like, man, I have no idea if he's going to be doing it right or if he's wrong.
You're doing great by having them start young. It's just so important to have them start young. Like my daughter is studying violin now. She's 5 and she's been studying it for a year and it's incredible. I just love watching her progress and she's like a sponge. She completely absorbs all of this stuff in a way that adults have a much harder time with. But, that's really awesome that he's doing it at 6.
And you're setting a perfect tone, I feel, with all these creative avenues. There's so much out there. It's just doesn't make kids any smarter. It doesn't help
Right.
culture them at all. So it's like with what you're doing, you're the example that you're setting for your daughter, which I think is great to be having your hands in so many different things, as we're seeing now in the BTS folder. And we talked a little bit about this before we went live, and it was like when I hit your BTS folder, it was like every moment was an oh my god moment. Like I might just pull Joe on and have him tell the story behind every single one of these frames. We'll be here all day. But if anything
Sure.
jumps out in your mind that was just a super cool or interesting experience.
Actually, what I'd love to do before we jump into BTS is if we could show that mood board thing for the cinematography, because I feel like it would
Yeah,
definitely give me some context to talk about on the
definitely.
BTS, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, totally. And give me just a moment here, everybody. We're going to pull this up.
So what this is, for everyone's listening, is how cinematographers have a page with videos on it usually. And that's all great, but like what I like to do here is I like to create a mood board of screenshots essentially from different work that I've shot. And what that does is it allows somebody who's got like 10 seconds, who's checking out my work, like potential client, production company, director. It gives them a sense of what my style is really, really quickly. So I wanted to share this with you guys because this is the cinematography side of things. This is the work I do on set when I'm collaborating with a lot of talented artists and people that I respect in the industry. And it's like really, it's different than the photography work, and it's different than the piano work, obviously, but even the visuals are. And I feel like, before we dive into the BTS, I want you guys to see what types of images make me tick, the ones that make me excited and happy to shoot and capture.
Dude, your
And
stuff is so good. I think if this was my mood board of personal work, I'd just stop.
oh, thank you.
It's so, and to think that these are all just still frames plucked out of.
Yeah. I do a lot of commercial work primarily, especially since my daughter was born. But I'm just getting back into narrative. I'm looking to jump on a show probably this year, and maybe do another feature. So, I'm all about the storytelling. Film is such a collaborative medium. It's all about the story. You have to, as a cinematographer, the difference is you do your best to serve the imagery and the atmosphere of the piece, but you also need to step back and let the story tell itself and not impose so much of yourself on the work. With commercial work, with short form, it's a lot like photography in the sense that you're prioritizing aesthetics and you have a shorter time frame and smaller set of images that you're capturing, but you also want to connect with the humanity of your actors and your talent, and you want to show them in their best light. Even though you're selling a product, for it to be convincing and for it to work, there has to be something authentic happening. And I try to do that visually with the camera work, with where I put the cameras and how I light it, how I treat the actual piece, as a cinematographer.
Yeah, I mean, your lighting, the color grading, just the entire vibe of everything is beautiful.
Thank you.
Now, because I have to ask, I got to see what's in the camera bag. What's the favorites? What's your go-to?
Oh boy. Okay. So gear wise, I'm not a huge gearhead, but I I do have my preferences for what I like to work with. These days, I'm fully invested in Arri Alexa Mini LF. That's my camera of choice for commercial work and some of the narrative work I do. But I'm not limited to just Arri, like I work with Reds and Sony Venice and a lot of different equipment. It depends on the project. I like to pair it with the project. And for me, the camera is secondary to the lenses. The lenses are really what flavor the piece, what
Interesting.
give it its character. And I love working with everything from more modern lenses like the Arri Signature Primes or the Cooke S7s to more vintage lenses like Cow Anamorphics. Like everything in between, it's really Leica Rs. I have a beautiful set of Leica Rs that I love. And by the way, my relationship with Leica is so complicated. I'm so tied into what they produce and what they do. Like I use so much of it in my work. It's crazy, especially the Leica Rs for the cinematography side. And on the still side, I'm primarily working with the SL2 and the SL2S. Those are my go-to cameras. I shoot tethered into a Capture One station with a Digitech typically. And the color science is absolutely amazing with those cameras. The reason why I jumped into that world is because they save me so much time in post.
Mm.
I'm basically bringing the images into Capture One and they look exactly like how I want them to look edited. So it saves me all this time. I do really minor tweaks and then it's off to retouching and I'm done. I'm not like sitting there, creating a look for everything all the time. I've created that look on set. And it's really quite amazing to see that happen. Um, but anyways, getting back to cinematography, I, to your point, there's definitely when I look at something like this, there's definitely a common thread between all of the images. And that's what I call style. This is my personal style. This is an imprint of who I am as a cinematographer. And that's why I think cinematographers should definitely have a page like this on their site. Because people are not going to have the time to sit there and go through all your videos, but they will have 10, 20, 30 seconds to take a quick glance and suddenly know what you're all about. And I feel like this is better than, say, Instagram and things like that, because it allows you to put things together and reorder them really easily and play around with things and not have the noise of comments and likes and all of that get in the way, which drives me crazy.
Totally. I've
Yeah.
never seen a cinematographer do this, which I think this is one of those like why wouldn't everybody have this?
It
It's
came out of necessity. It was more like, let me, instead of walking you through, an hour of clicking through the videos, why don't I just send you this page? You'll get a sense of what it's like. And it works like a charm. It's wonderful. Like, I'm going to keep playing around with this and adding to it as I keep shooting new things. And yeah, I think it's essentially a mood board for your work.
that's awesome. And it pairs up.
Yeah. So now that you've seen some of those screenshots, a lot of those images that you saw here are the BTS, uh, you know, components.
This puts it all in perspective, everything we've been talking about having a team behind you and really.
Yeah, definitely. Cinematography is extremely collaborative. There's a lot of people on set and they're all excellent at what they do if you're on a really good set.
Mhm.
So, and that's the charm of, that's why I love doing it so much. One of the main reasons why it's the collaboration,
Mhm.
you know?
Just looks like a heck of a lot of fun where the hard work pays off and it's the experience. It just looks like it's awesome, man. I don't think anybody who hasn't worked on a set like this wouldn't at least want to even just wander around on set. And just it's so interesting to me to see how everything comes together. We watch movies and TV shows that really pull us in, and we feel like within 2 episodes you feel like you're part of the family that's there. And it's like it's so interesting to
Right.
see the work that goes into those pieces of cinema becoming part of our lives.
Well, I had the privilege of studying under Vilmos Sigmund, amazing cinematographer with the Global Cinematography Institute in 2014 or so. And having worked with him, like everything I did before then, I had to throw out the window. And so basically, my point is I try not to get into the technical aspect of it, although these things look super technical, these setups. I feel like the technical stuff gets in the way. It's there for a reason, but like you have to not lose sight of what you're creating and what you're working with, the light, the way you're pacing the camera movements. And oh, there's that image of Richard Branson I told you about. I think that's pretty funny. Yeah, but anyways, it's really about like it's really important to show up and scout a location and get a vibe for the space before just dumping a bunch of equipment in it. Right? Like it's they're both connected. The two aspects work together in a way that will benefit you in the long run, but you have to not lose sight of making the space work for you and your talent.
Yeah. I think it's like you have the film industry where it's, yes, like you said, they have the cranes and you have all this equipment and all these people, but it's not because, oh, hey, like when you get to the other end of the spectrum, it's like the people that buy every new camera that comes out and every piece of gear. And it's like you're out there, oh, I just want you to see my rig all built up and this and that. It's like, no, all of this is out of necessity.
Yeah.
There for a reason. It's not for show. It's literally
Correct.
because you have to create everything that you see has to be created. If it's, even what's given to you in available light, you have to manipulate it to get the look you want.
Sometimes I get better results with no lights and with just natural light with me and a talent than, being slowed down by a massive set, right? Or sometimes I want the massive set because the work I'm doing is really stylized. So really it comes down to what you're doing. Is it a screenplay? Is this the type of film you're trying to make, right? Or is this the type of commercial you're trying to make? And having a really clear idea, almost as a creative director of lighting and camera work, right? You have to have a really clear idea of what serves the story and the project in its best interest. You don't just do things just for the ability to play around with the big toys and all of that and impress clients and do that's, to me, I'm kind of way beyond that now at this stage in my career. I'm really interested in doing work that is real and reflects how I feel about, either the screenplay or the creative brief.
Do you feel that film makes you a more intentional still photographer because of what you just said? Like you can't just go out and say, all right, we're just going to shoot a bunch of stuff and then edit it together. Like you has to be storyboarded. You have to have a vision and a goal in mind, which you don't always have to have that with still photography. You can spray and pray and get lucky, but I feel like with film, it would make you a more intentional still photographer where now you have the pieces laid out in advance to tell the story.
Yes and no. You have the pieces laid out, but then when you're a still photographer, it's like you've built the stage around the performance, but then there's also the performers in still photography, and you're trying to get something out of them. So the process is really fun because it's like, as a cinematographer, I'm building setups, right? Like I'm creating an atmosphere, I'm creating a mood. The director is getting the performances out of everybody. And that's great. I learn a lot from the great directors I work with, right? And then that helps me be a better still photographer because then, sure, everything is set up, but now I'm connecting with the person, right? And then if I lose the ability to connect to somebody, it's because I've lost connection with myself. And to get that connection with myself, I go to the piano and I reconnect with myself and wash, rinse, repeat. That's the life of an artist, essentially.
That's what all this boils down to. It's like all the images we looked at, it all comes down to just this cyclical thing of, you have your creative outlets. One creative outlet can help boost another creative outlet. And it's just a circle of creativity. It's like the circle of life for artists.
Exactly. And that we're not even talking about things like self-criticism and self-doubt and all of that whole rabbit hole, because we all go down there, obviously. But this is really just a very sort of top level look at what that's like.
That was awesome. Look, Joe, this was everything I thought it would be. I was super stoked to have this conversation with you. And it's really great to dive into the mind of a creative genius. I'm going to call you a creative genius. I don't know if you've ever been referred to, but it's sticking right now because I really think what you do is just, it's phenomenal. And I think we talked about changing mediums a lot. That was kind of like the theme of when we talked before, and it was an underlining theme of today, and having not just changing mediums for the sake of creativity, but having that cohesive vision, having that style like that you talked about, where you can be all over the place. And as one of my first mentors said, we were talking about a mutual friend that we knew, and was like, man, one day it was phenomenal work, and the next day it was like, who did she give her camera to? And it was like, I remember this is one of the lessons I learned early on. I'm like, I remember saying, she could do great things, and he was like, well, you don't know which version is going to show up. And it was something where it was like, I learned early on, I'm like, okay, cohesion and having, you can do different styles, and looking at your mood board page, it's all over the place as far as styles, as far as it's moody. Some is bright. Some is, the tones are a little more faded out, and some are very vibrant, but it's all you, and it's all
Yes.
cohesive. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is really building out your creative direction in multiple directions, but it all comes back home to one place.
100%.
Wow, Joe, this was great, super inspiring. Look, I'm a huge fan of your work. I want to follow you and continue to follow the journey. We're going to drop Joe's website here, josephseif.com, and I'm going to drop the Instagram here real quick for everybody. So Danny, we can get these, and I believe it's JSeif Visuals, correct? Is the Instagram?
Correct.
Correct. Got a good memory. All right, there we go. We're going to drop that down there. Danny's going to get that dropped into the comment section, so you guys can go check that out. But Joe, huge thank you to you. Any final words?
I just want to say thank you so much for your time, Derek. This was a really, really great conversation, and thank you to Leica, and yeah, really appreciate it.
Awesome. Yes, a huge thank you to Leica for hosting another edition of Leica Stories. Be sure to follow along the rest of Joe's journey into film, stills, underwater, and the like. But that's all we got today. Another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space is in the books. Catch y'all next time.